Okay, so recording is in progress, and hopefully everybody's good with that. Good afternoon, happy Thursday, happy summer. My name is Rob Romanowski. I'm the Director of Sales Operations with 3HTI, and here we are, another Thursday and another webinar regarding Creo. And today we're going to look at what's new in Creo 9. This was the most recent release from PTC for Creo. We have Paul Dye from the Virtual Center of Excellence at PTC that's going to take us through a presentation deck of what's new in Creo, as well as a brief demo on some of those items. If you have any questions, be sure to type those in. We'll try to answer them as we go along. We'll answer them at the end. And without any further ado, Paul, take it away. Let's go.
All right, and you can hear me okay? You can still see my screen?
I hear you loud and clear, my friend.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Rob, for having me on. I'm very happy to be talking through this today. And yeah, my name is Paul Dye. I am an application engineer and solutions consultant here at PTC. And Rob asked me on today to talk through what's new in Creo 9. There's a lot of different things. And unlike Zoom, maybe for example, there's been a lot of improvements and a lot of things that we're actively building out, right? So a lot of different improvements in many different areas, things like usability and productivity, human factors, where we have our mannequin analysis, which again, for any of these different areas, we're going to go through, talk to them, see some demonstrations in the context of Creo. So you'll get to see a little bit of that workflow as well. Multiple areas like model-based definition, detailing, generative design, simulation, additive, subtractive, tons of different areas, right? We could talk for 3 or 4 hours on all these different topics, right? But for today, we'll try to keep it a little bit more concise. Again, going to be a little bit longer than maybe you would see on your typical type of webinar that we like to run, where we like to keep it around 20 minutes. This might reach a little bit more closer to the half-hour mark, but it's really just because we have so much to cover, right? So a lot of different areas that we want to dive into. Again, like Rob mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. We'll do our best to get those answered for you. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. And first area that I want to talk to is with usability and productivity, really just base Creo design functions. Starting here first with divide and unify surfaces. This is a new capability to say, take a given surface, but I want to deal with just a piece of it. This is useful in a lot of different areas. Things like manufacturing information can be very useful. You might see it worked with model-based definition, where if you want to define something of a given area, also works well in something like simulation or generative. If you wanted to apply a load or constraint on just a specific area of a surface, but not that entire surface, well, that's something now that you can do with this divide surface function. You can divide a surface if you want to designate it for a certain function, and also unify. You could work with the divided surfaces, get to wherever you need to, and then finally you can put them back together. So that's a strong new capability that we have here within Creo Parametric that you want to try out. Some changes here to design intent management, mostly in the model tree. You really have kind of an evolution tree for things like bodies or quotes, where all the different steps that were taken to create a surface, you can see that, right? All the features that went into it. If you haven't seen the design items tree, this is something that's a very strong capability. Things like custom groups, you can do some grouping of your own items, almost make up that model tree for yourself. In more complex models, you can really build up that design methodology into the model itself. And even for more basic ones, you have clear access to filters and columns. There's now a toolbar for that. It's really all about making that model tree and the design tree workflows work a lot better for our users and make it a lot easier to work with. Improvements here in the sketcher. The biggest one probably being the auto scale for your first sketch. So if you're at the very first sketch of starting a new part, you draw something out, you make a change, maybe just the height of a rectangle, it's able to scale the whole piece based on what you changed for that first sketch. Really easy to get where you want to. You don't have large numbers left over or having to track down missing dimensions because it all got scaled wrong. So that's a really nice improvement there. Also have some nice inspection improvements, being able to look at what's wrong with the sketch, look for open ends, highlight overlaps that can now be persistent. So several different improvements for making sure that our sketches are coming out the way that we want. We have the ability here now to do a curve from point function. You basically just define a point, give it a direction, and allows you to build a curve off of that. This is something that was highly requested, something that a lot of our surfacing users have requested. So we've had that built in now as well. So that's a very welcome function. We made improvements in patterns. We have more flexibility and especially speed, really speed up things like identical pattern groups. This can be done much faster. You can see there, we're going from what may have taken for a part up there 48 seconds before. Well, now we're able to do it in just about 2 seconds. So it's very quick, very easy to work with, easier to define them, easier to adjust them when you need to regenerate. So a lot of nice improvements there that you're going to see in patterning. Improvements here in surfacing. First and foremost, you have better control over the curve definition, specifically curvature and acceleration control points. You can now grab them, see them, makes it easier to get those curves exactly the way you want. And you can see here also in our freestyle tool, we can now smooth and simplify curves. We have what we have in a new brush capability within that freestyle tool for really sculpting more of that organic shape. I'll go through and show what that looks like in a brief demonstration, but that's a very strong tool that we have now within freestyle. We also have the ability to mirror shapes inside of freestyle. So a lot of different additions in that area. And again, a tool that's actually available to all of our Creo users, even in the base package of Creo. Improvements here in ECAD support. We added the ability to import screen layer and solder mask. Those are all going to come in as context data from the EDA files. So if you work between both MCAD, like you have here in Creo Parametric, and users over working in ECAD, we're able to work very well between those and now able to bring in that screen layer and solder mask. Improvements in assemblies. You can replace a component within an assembly, retrieve missing components. That these two things got reworks. It's now a lot easier to go in and find the parts that you need, clean them up, make sure that those are working together well. You can find component session IDs in the model tree, group exploded offset lines, also improve dealing with circular references. This is something that now is just a single button that we have inside of our notification center to go in, explore those circular references, track them down, and get them fixed. So that's something that we wanted to build out a little bit more, and something that's now a lot easier for our users to work around. Okay, with that, I want to go through a brief demonstration of our freestyle tool so you can get a little bit of a view of that brush functionality that I mentioned earlier. So let's go ahead and dive into that. All right, so here I'm just going to go ahead and open up the data set that we want to use for this part. You can see here it's a pretty organic shape, kind of a bunny rabbit model. This could have been brought in from another surfacing tool. Maybe it was someone sent us over from Blender, whatever it might be. Maybe it was even built up in here in Creo. But in this case, it was actually created using the reconstruct from facets feature in Freestyle. So if I want to go ahead and start working on this, we'll go ahead into the ribbon, open up our freestyle surface, and go into our brush capability here. So a lot of things that you can work with around this. First option that we have here is pull, which is going to move the mesh vertices along their normal in whatever direction that you choose. The brush size, like you can see, has different settings that we can change to increase or decrease the brush size. You can change the softness and the intensity to really give you some organic looking surfaces. And these can always be changed while you're working. And once we have that, we can go ahead and start manipulating this mesh like you see here. See, as I move the mouse along that surface, it's pulling on the different facets and giving us a much different type of geometry. It's a very organic style of modeling. And very easily, one thing that you can do here to change the pull direction is to hold in the shift key, and you can see it basically pushes in that model as well in the opposite direction. Inflate is another brush option that we have here to uniformly scale the mesh. Might be useful for some of our rabbit's ears if we just want to make that a little bit more uniform. And another useful tip that you have here for the brush is the fact that it can actually be used for selection on the model. This is a very quick way to select on different faces of that surface that we have here. And then once we go through and have that selection built out, it's very easy to jump back into your different brush tools, make your proper adjustments, move things in or out. As you can see, just a very organic tool. You don't have to think too much. Just say, hey, if I want to see it in one direction, just pull it, push it, whatever you need to do. And really, that's made a lot easier there with the brush tool as well. All right, so just a quick look there, and obviously a lot of things that we always like to focus in and general usability and functionality. A lot of our Creo users are pretty much working with that on a daily basis, so always things that we look to make improvements upon. Okay, next we're going to go through some of the improvements that we have in human factors. This might be something that you've also seen called mannequin. This is essentially just your ability to take human models and put them into the context of your assemblies. Look for things like ergonomics, fit, feel, and building that into part of your design process. So this got a rework. We have, first and foremost, a new mannequin editor. There's now a new custom mannequin that you can take, change, resize, whatever your specific design needs are. And then what you can do is save that off. You can save many different mannequins of their own shape and size. And after that, go ahead and use them inside of your assembly, just as you would any other mannequin. So really nice addition there. I'll go through and show what a few of these different things look like. We also improved the manipulation and constraints. You'll now see a 3D dragger like you'll see everywhere else, basically in Creo. It's now available inside a mannequin where you pick an edge and it's going to show that to you, make it easier to move things around. The reach functionality also got an improvement. It'll basically show a missing distance, show how far away you are whenever you try to reach. It's not going to just say, no, this person's not able to reach. It'll say, no, you're pretty close. It's actually able to go through and show exactly how far away you are as well. So easier to go through, figure that out, and go ahead and fix that mannequin. And also one thing here as well, you have better visibility in the model tree of what you're doing inside of mannequin. So really just making, keeping track of everything much easier than it was before. Also improve safety. You have a visual field that you can now turn on, something that it's going to show what's obstructing that view, if looking for whatever your mannequin happens to be looking at. And then after those obstructions, what can you still see? What things can't you see? You're going to have multiple different visibility cones. And ultimately, you're going to get a better understanding and idea of that field of view for your mannequin, your users that are working with these types of equipment out in the field, and just making sure that they're able to see what they need to. All right, with this, I also have a demonstration that we can dive into to take a look at the human factors improvements. Go ahead and switch over here into our Creo environment. All right, and let's go ahead and get started here. Pull up our model that we want to work with. So depending on the types of designs that you or your team work with, there's lots of different considerations that you might have to take into account. You can think of something like a motorcycle, obviously fit, ergonomics, these type of things come into play. And that's really what human factors is all about. It's bringing in these types of human models, make sure they can see what they need to, make sure they can reach, make sure they fit. And with Creo 9, like I mentioned, we have some new functionality around that. The biggest one probably is this ability to do custom mannequins. We have a huge library of standard sized people, tall, short, various ethnic backgrounds. And what you can do now is take that and customize it. You can make it however you want. You can make them taller, shorter, heavier, longer, shorter arms, whatever best fits the demographic that you're designing around. If you're going for a specific market or you have certain limitations, you can just build that all out your own. And the user interface is very easy, like you see here, to edit, set the height and weight, set all those different components that you can take using any of your standard human factor analyses that you want to run. So you can set them all up however you'd like. And what we can do now is save that off. And this is going to be an inseparable assembly. That means it's very clean to work with inside of your other assemblies. And now that's completely customizable. Really strong feature that we have there with Creo 9. Right, we can go through here now in our model and add him in, make sure that he fits correctly. Just go ahead and insert that into the design. We'll grab that custom mannequin that we were working on. And we want to place him on the bike in a seated position. There's a few different references that we'll lay out to do that. Where we'll place him, what direction he's facing, essentially like a datum plane or surface on his bottom side, and that direction for him. Again, that's some standard functionality. We can look at some of the new ones here as well, one of which being the new interface that we're working with in here. Over on the left, we have our mannequin tree that we can manage all the different pieces and snapshots in time, how snapshots work. We can put the mannequin into these different postures, hands in the right positions, and take snapshots of that. So you can always reference back to those different positions. We also want to make sure that the reach works out so our user can reach what they need to. Like I mentioned, another new functionality that we have in that reach feature is the fact that if your mannequin is unable to reach, it'll put the arm out as far as possible. You can see exactly how close you are. And if you can't reach, you can see exactly what that distance is. In my case, it seems to be working pretty well. We can keep working. And we can also see our new dragger functionality in the arm there. It makes it very easy to adjust, make sure that it's comfortable. We can do the same thing here on the left hand. Make sure that reach is good. And from there, we're just manipulating the forearm with that 3D dragger, make sure everything is working as it should be. Maybe we want to do a similar thing down here on the feet. And the way this works is we're aligning the different points in the model with points in the mannequin. That's fundamentally how that reach feature works. We'll do the same thing on the other side here. Just make sure that these motions can be physically done, but at the same time, we're making sure that we're not going to have problems. Is the leg interfering with the mufflers? Are your toes going to bump into something? It's much better to figure that out here before having to go build out a full prototype. All right, and maybe here we also notice that our model looks a little bit uncomfortable. We can always go through and make changes if need be. We can do that from our mannequin tree on the left if we want to. We can use the dragger to move him into the right positions. Just make sure that his riding experience is as comfortable as possible. And now, as you can see with Creo 9, these type of motions are done a lot easier, really get him into the right position. I think it looks pretty good. Looks like our mannequin is good to ride, get out on the road. And at any point, if you like the current position, again, you can take a snapshot of that you can always come back to, send out to others on the team. Last thing that I want to touch on here also is the new ability to set up our view fields. In this case, it's going to be coming from the eyes of the mannequin. And once we set that up, we can look right from there through a certain piece. Allows us to see what objects are obstructing that view, see which ones are in that view that are fine to be in that view, and just really get a very clear understanding of what that view code is. It's a very useful tool, something that's going to update with the model if the model would update as well. Again, all these different things, all new with Creo 9. All right, so that does it for our human factors analysis. Definitely some very welcome improvements there that a lot of our users are going to get some really great use out of. And moving on to improvements in model-based definition and detailing. We already mentioned the idea of that divide surface that falls into this. We also have improvements in surface finish, similar to what we've done with previous releases of Creo recently, with all the other annotations, nodes, dimensions, and so forth. We now have surface finish getting a rewrite. It's easier to work with, easier to edit. You have a new gallery of surface finish symbols. So a lot of nice improvements there that you're going to see if you work with surface finish. We have the ability to do parameters with symbols. So these can be predefined. You can use them as you place a particular symbol, and then your downstream consumers can see all those parameters and act upon them. Weld symbol parameters are also now exposed in Windchill's NPM link. You can use those for your manufacturing planning or process planning. And we also added default parameters for out-of-the-box welded surface finish symbols. You automatically get some automatic parameters, and now you can also add your own in there as well. GD&T Advisor got some improvements. This is a tool to help our users that are working in model-based definition with expert guidance on the application of your dimensions and tolerances in your models. With this, we have now better support for detailing standards with the new details tab, on-demand creation of missing dimensions. This means you no longer have to stop, get out of GD&T Advisor to go create a dimension and then come back into it to use it. You can just do that right on the fly. And cross-highlighting of annotations between your graphics area and the GD&T Advisor tree. It's very easy. You just click on one of the features in the tree, see it visualized right in the graphics area. Very easy to track them down and work with those different annotations. Some nice improvements here in hatching for making our drawings. Really cleaned up the workflow for creating and editing hatch patterns. That's it, much easier to do now. It's easier to access your favorite hatch patterns. You can really customize that to your heart's content and very easily work with them. All right, that does it for what I wanted to cover there around our detailing and model-based definition. Definitely both areas that we work with and improve on every single release of Creo. And now we're going to move into a little bit more, I'd say, of an exciting area that we have around generative design and simulation. I'm going to go through multiple different tools here. I'll start here first with Creo Simulation Live. This is, again, if you haven't seen this tool before, it is part of our partnership with Ansys to put real-time simulation capabilities right into the design environment. And now this has support for multi-physics. Used to support your stress type analysis, but now it also can have thermal and stress loads within one particular study. So that's a very welcome addition. We also have support for formula or gyroid-based lattices. These can now all be included in your simulations. For example, if you put a gyroid-based lattice inside of that part, that can now be taken care of inside of Simulation Live. So for our users that work in the world of 3D printing, definitely an area of improvement that's well welcomed. A lot of work with Creo Ansys simulation. We can now take and create things like mid-surface geometry, now have support for bearing loads and inertia relief. And also things like copying and pasting loads. What this means is you don't have to reproduce them every single time, type them in every time that you get into a new study. You could just simply do a copy and paste, move them from one study to another. So a very nice improvement that we have there working in Creo ANSYS simulation, just to make your job a lot easier in that sense. Creo flow analysis got a number of different improvements. You can now store multiple CFD projects within one model. You don't have to store them out separately. You can look at the various ones, hop from one to the other if you'd like to. We worked on meshing in this tool with some tessellation improvements. We now also support lattice geometry within our flow analysis. The idea of using lattices for things like heat exchangers and so forth, that can now all be studied using Creo flow analysis. Also behavior modeling integration. If you haven't worked with that before, that's a Creo parametric modeling tool that we have for automatically solving different parameters that you lay out given for a specific goal that you want to solve for. And now this works in our flow analysis studies as well. For example, if you wanted to solve for an exit velocity based on these 3 or 4 parameters, we just let the system go run and find it, see exactly what affects it, and we can do an optimization to solve for whatever particular goal that you lay out. That could all be done now within your flow analysis. Last area here is our generative design. This has had multiple different improvements. We have the concept of a safety factor now to minimize mass at that specific safety factor. We can also now do modal analysis for our vibrations. That could mean maximizing the fundamental frequency for a certain mass volume target or minimizing the mass at some frequency floor. These are all areas that you're able to design around now within generative. We also added in support for ball joint constraints. So if you want to lay those out, you can now. And you can also now run an initial simulation before you start into a generative optimization. It's essentially like a sanity check, just making sure that your loads and constraints all look right, and then you can go do your generative run. So it avoids spending time trying to go through, solve things, and just ultimately realizing that you didn't have the study set up right initially. So something you can run as that sanity check before diving into an analysis. Right, with that, I want to go through and show a demonstration specifically here on what I mentioned around that behavior modeling and flow analysis integration. It's a very strong capability, so we can go ahead here and see what that looks like. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here, pull up our model that we want to work with to see that integration. Here we can see we're looking at the front of the design. We got the windscreen, got the dash, got the beak down at the bottom. And here I have a base study set up with a few initial conditions. If you've never seen this tool before, we're essentially able to do these sort of flow studies from right within Creo to look at many different types of simulations. In this case, we're going to be looking at an external flow. You can see that it's very easy to work with, easy to see and visualize the results from the study. You very easily change these things around with the pop-up toolbars that you can see there to get really everything that you need right in front of you without having to track down various menus. In our case here, you can see that the flow is entering in at 60 miles per hour. These are pressures on the sides there as well. You can see where the results that we're getting from that. And right now it's pretty good, but say you wanted to improve upon that, get better results in some way, or even just see if the design can get me to a certain minimum, right? So what I'll do is lay out a behavior modeling study. So what these become now are input parameters that I can use along with some other variables. Say we want to work with our pressure in the X direction, can help us answer lots of questions, right? Are the speeds that we're seeing here able to get us to the pressures that we're concerned about? Maybe we need to stay under a certain pressure or velocity. Well, that's what behavior modeling is really all about. And instead of us having to manually try out all those different variables and design parameters, like you can see here, we can just let the system do that work for us and see what we get. So first thing that we're going to do here is the sensitivity study. So we're seeing as we vary a parameter or value, what kind of results are we going to get? This is a lot faster than us just trying and iterating through values to see what we get. We can just let the system go ahead and compute those results and see what we get. All right, even better now, what we could do is an optimization. This is another study type that we can use to get to our most optimized model. This is a standard type of Creo functionality, but we can make direct use of that here in our flow analysis study. In this case, we could set the pressure on the part to certain values. So that's what my design constraint is. And then we can lay out exactly what we're able to vary. So we'll allow that velocity to change in this case. And what's really great about this is the fact that we could run multiple different types of parameters, constraints for different variables, and we just let the system run. If the constraints that we're looking to get to are impossible, the system will let us know. But that's way better than us having to fumble around for a day trying to figure all that out. Right, so once it goes through, runs to get this result, we can see what value that it converges onto for our optimal result based on how many iterations that we give the system to run through. And once the system converges, we're able to see exactly what that value is. That's something that can be automatically applied to the study. And with that change, we're able to go back and see what the new results would be, getting towards more of that optimized model. Right, and as you can see, really able to do that type of refinement work throughout our flow analysis studies, not only getting to a design in a study that simply just works or would pass, but really getting to a much more refined and much more efficient model at the end of the day. All right, so that really covers everything that I wanted to show around the flow analysis capabilities. Again, a lot of great things that are getting added in there, a very strong tool for anyone that wants to work in that regard. All right, so the last area that I want to touch on now here is with the world of additive and subtractive manufacturing. First thing I'll touch on is in the additive world. First thing that we added was support for open quilts on stochastic lattices. You can make things like skin lattices very easily with this type of lattice. It's very interesting geometry. Also, automatic redirect of fluid flows. Again, getting back into that concept of using flow analysis for something like heat exchangers using those lattices, things like that. It's going to be very useful for. You can do variable wall offset for your formula-based lattices. You can now mix user-defined and materialized style support structures within a given model. Materialized is our metal-based printing base for what we work off of. So those are definitely some welcome improvements that we have in the additive world. Several improvements here in high-speed machining, better surface finish and flexibility with the new geodesic 5-axis finishing toolpath. In Creo 8, we added in the 5-axis roughing toolpath, so now this is going to help us in that finishing aspect. Really helps to improve tool life, avoid chatter, faster overall machining, and faster overall NC programming time as well. That's a very welcome enhancement. We also have fully associative in-process stock models over in the model tree now. You can turn them on or off. They're fully associative at any time. So those can all be updated very easily. A lot of nice improvements there in stock models. And here also improvements in machining enhancements. A lot of small things, flexibility with particular NC toolpaths for getting rid of multiple things in the model, or really the limitations of only being able to use predefined CL commands. You can now define your own, as many different CL commands as you want, and then add them into your toolpath. So really whatever your post-processor needs might be. And then finally, we added in cutter compensation support. This is within profile passes in high-speed milling roughing. This was a customer request that we got to get cutter compensation in there. So definitely a nice to have in that sense. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up by looking at a quick subtractive manufacturing demonstration. All right, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to look at multiple of those improvements that I touched on there. Let's pull up our data set that we want to work off of. More specifically, let's get this rear hub part. This is where all of these spokes are connected into. Might make a forging for most of that, and really just don't want to get into production. So we'll go ahead and open up our machining assembly for that. All right, here we're going to go through and check out a few different toolpaths. In this case, let's look at the multi-axis roughing toolpath. And that's really what you want on a part like this. You don't want to spend a ton of time treating this like a 3-axis mill that could take hours to go through and try to set up. Just say, hey, I want to machine all of this. And since it's a multi-axis toolpath, it'll rotate that tool for you automatically. Gives me a very efficient roughing toolpath. So that was something that we introduced in Creo 8, that geodesic roughing option. And now with Creo 9, we have a new one that's related, but it's going to be for finishing, right? It's going to be a geodesic finishing option. So what we'll do is pick the tool of the appropriate size, pick the outside surfaces that we want to machine, lay out your step over, stock allowance, any of those parameters, really a lot of different options. And once you have that laid out, what you end up with is a very efficient toolpath, more specifically a finishing path where it does the same sort of thing, but we're treating it there like a revolving surface. You can really see how efficient that toolpath is. You can look at it right there in the model, or we could switch this over to Also a solid model visualization. We wanted to take a look at what that looks like. In this case, let's grab that stock model, go ahead and bring that in. And what you'll see is the part that started out roughed out. And now we can see exactly what that finishing path is going to look like. It's going to give us a very clean finish, very good surface finish, but above all, let the system do that level of access control for you. If it needs to clear a fixture, let the system do that. If it has undercuts, let the system figure that out for you. So really starting to automate that process, letting the system determine those different factors for you, so you don't have to manually go through and waste your time trying to figure that out yourself. Okay, and that's looking pretty good for my geodesic finishing path. That's the first new capability that I wanted to show off there. The next thing that I want to show off is working with in-process models. And what we have now is the capability to put stock models right into the tree on the left, basically related to whatever toolpath that you want. Let's turn off the workpiece so you can kind of see that. So this is the stock model that we get from our high-speed multi-axis roughing toolpath. It could really be any toolpath that you want. You can get the stock model out of that, take the previous one, use that to build out your next one, and they just sit there. They don't take up any calculations, but they're going to be available to you at any time that you want. You can show, hide them, use them for your rest finishing, rest roughing. That's now an option to use those. And you can also update them with just a click of a button. Really makes life easier throughout that process. All right, that's two of the new features, in-process stock models and that geodesic finishing option. And now we can take a look at one last one here. Go back into our model. Let's take a look at the seat and grab this big plastic piece. This is probably going to be an injection molded part. What I've done here is create a mold assembly for this part. This is actually from our tool design option for building out the cores and the cavities. We'll go ahead and see that here. And once we have these, we can go through, and in this case, we want to mill them out using Creo and C. And what you'll see around this is I have a few different high-speed roughing sequences laid out for these to go through and rough this thing out. That'll be the base for what we're going to be working off of here. You see that there. But like in most sequences that we have in the past, what we have is a feed rate step. And this is normally a constant that stays the same throughout the process, but depending on the complexity of the part that you're working with or the options that you've chosen, that could be a problem, right? So this has been a highly requested option that we've added in now to do adaptive feed rate control. All you have to do is within our parameters options here is switch a parameter for our feed rate. Go ahead and sort to very easily find that. Turn that to yes. And then we can set the different values for that speed rate. It's able to slow down, for example, here as much as 10% if we want to, but then otherwise it's going to run at the full rate. And now with those two settings, the system will recalculate using our new adaptive feed rate. And what you'll see is different feed rates depending on how much the tool is engaged. So we want the feed rate to be changing along with that. And while we want the main feed rate to stay as fast as possible, we do want it to slow down as it goes in and works into those more complex areas. So that's the third major improvement. We have our adaptive feed rate control for 3 and 5 axis high-speed roughing and rest roughing. All right, so that about covers everything that I wanted to touch on. Again, lots of different areas. Maybe some are more or less important to what your process is, but really want to make sure that we're touching on areas for all of our different users. So with that, I can pass it off to you, Rob, if you have any insight or anything that you wanted to share, but really everything that I wanted to cover there around Creo 9.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job. We got some feedback from one of our customers earlier this week, basically saying that they were using Creo 9. And they didn't go into any detail, but basically this customer has been using Creo 9 for 30 years. And they have a design shop where they design and build and repair plastic injection molds for automotive and electronics. And basically he was saying that this is the best release that he's seen of Pro E or Creo in the past 30 years. So we're trying to get some more detail out of them, but we're pretty happy with that endorsement. But as always, Paul, nice job. If any of you have any questions or want to get in touch with us, you can just reply to the email that was sent to you inviting you to this webinar. They come directly back to me. And something that I mention every week is that we have a focus at 3HTI on getting our customers proficient in using Creo and helping them to use the software so they can maximize the usage of Creo and get the best return on their investment possible. And one of the ways that we do that is by offering 2 hours of desk side coaching at a minimum. If you have one license of Creo, we will give you 1 hour of desk side coaching for every license that you have, with a minimum of 2 hours. So this helps you to use the software with our engineers to specifically how you model and how you need to use Creo so your team can become more proficient at it. So that's going to end the webinar for today. Next week, we're going to take a look at the advanced assembly extension for creating skeleton models and also doing concurrent engineering. So that's a great extension and a great topic. So if you're familiar with it, please join us. If you're not, join us and you'll definitely learn something. So Paul, once again, thanks a lot for your help today. Have a great weekend and we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.